the Ruach, you got to take off your cultural habits, traditions, language, and mindset. That's Hebrew. And then it says, he had hid and concealed Moshe his face because he beheld Mem He Bet Yod Tet El Elohim. So it says, oh, Moses hid his face because he had beheld the countenance of Elohim. You could say, another way to translate this, is suddenly Moshe realized that the hiding place of the face of Elohim is in the habitat of this stuff he was just revealing. The understanding of these words, the understanding of these letters. These letters are not just an ancient language. Yeah, they are an ancient language. It's the hiding place. It's the sitar. It's the treasury. It's the treasure box. It's the treasure the entire world has been searching for all these years. And they're hidden in these letters.
And it's the fractal of everything.
It's the fractal pattern of everything. So therefore, if you it's like, hey, I got a golden gizmo, and you stick the golden gizmo on the shelf and you look at it. You don't want to worship it, but what do you do with the golden gizmo? But this, you can break it open and use it. This, you can break it open and appreciate its, as it were, the aroma, the understanding, the beauty, wow, it's the face of Elohim. Wow, it's the identity of the Mashiach of Israel. Wow, it's the promise for the reconfederation of the 12 tribes that have been scattered and lost across the face of the earth. Wow, it's the doorway, the entrance to the Messianic era that Brother Yehuda has been hoping for, yearning for, praying for, and projecting that they know it's real, even though other preachers of other religions have told them that they're lost, deluded, and burning in hell. No, they know that they're supposed to hope for this. And here is the key. Walking out the Moedim is the key. Having these words on our mind and heart. Deuteronomy 30. With all your heart and all your soul. Come back to these words I tell you today. It's the key to the whole culture, the whole nation. And it's right here in the story of Exodus 3. I mean, we could go on with more, but not to do that. We just want to focus in on that right there. But there's more that prove it out through the rest of the whole chapter of Exodus 3. Here it is.
Excellent.
And it can be used. Now, John, did you have anything else to say at this point? In terms of, let me ask you this. When I was first looking at this, I was involved in a little matter with a bank, and I had signed a paper, a contract, and the bank was saying, hey, you got to do this and that, and I was like, do I? Really? I don't know. My friend said to me, you better know every word of that contract. What did you agree to? So I went back and I looked at the contract, and it said, we would like to extend you the privilege of using this credit line. Okay. I looked up in Black's Law Dictionary the word for privilege. It said the privilege is an exemption of an obligation or a burden imposed on somebody who didn't have the privilege. So it's like, well, the privilege of use means there's no obligation. And then they said, we're going to call ourselves the lender and we're going to call you the borrower. Okay. And as the point I've made, I could call myself the hippopotamus and you the giraffe. But those are just labels. They mean nothing. That doesn't mean you are a giraffe. There is no money being lent. There is no money being borrowed. I gave them a piece of paper worth about $10,000, which they held and let me use a system. There was no loan. And now they were trying to prosecute me for something that didn't exist, which was a loan that never happened. And I had to look at every word to know what was going on. And I refused to consent to their shanghaiing the real words and imposing a false contract upon me that now said that I had to obey false words that didn't really exist. I find that to be the model of why did Yahweh let that happen to me? Well, that was back in 2008, 2009, 2010, and it was the time I was discovering this language, and I realized the Hebrew language is a contract between Israel and Yod He Vav He. And other people have, like the attorneys, have taken the contract, changed the meanings of the words, said these don't exist, these do exist, ran with it, and I even said, hey, I'm going to use the meaning of this word privilege, and the arbitrator said, oh, we're not going to use the meaning of that word today, like that. What? You, a third person interloper, get to determine whether we're going to use this meaning of this word today? Well, fortunately, Yahuwah's words endure forever.
Yeah.
So my burden of obligation is to not be deceived by the adversary and to find out the meaning of these words. And that's the quest I've been on. Thank you, Yahweh, for that court matter that pulled me in to the notion of looking at your words. Anyway, not to put you on the spot, but I believe you could validate that exercise of knowing the words, because that's where the truth is.
Well,
Could I at least ask you that much?
all right. So if we want to talk about consent,
We have to talk about consent because it's only the people that consent to be governed by Yahuwah that are governed by Yahuwah. Otherwise, they are not one of his people if they don't consent to obey his regulations of governance.
right?
Isn't the Declaration of Independence of the United States say something about that?
Well, it is a phrase in the Declaration that says contracts are instituted by consent of the governed. And so what's what you were talking about. And in the Declaration, it's really not the word contracts, they use the word governments. Governments are instituted by consent of the governed. And just before that phrase, it says, to secure rights, governments are instituted among men by consent of the governed. And just before that, the Declaration of Independence says, we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights.
They're certain.
secure
They're absolute.
Certain
They are real.
rights. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted by consent of the governed. Well, the rights were given us by God, by Yah, before the United States ever existed, before the Declaration was ever created. They're unalienable rights.
And what does that word alien, what does it mean to lean? What is
Well,
unalienable
when you
mean?
borrowed from a bank, you offered something as consideration, perhaps a lien against the property that you were working on. Either that or just maybe it was an unsecured loan or secured only by your
It was a piece
promise.
of paper with my signature on it, is all it was. The
Okay.
signature was the only thing of value.
So you did consent to the terms and agreements of that contract. So here in the United States, we have the authority in the founding document to consent or not consent. That's individually. That's not by voting. We can't 51 out of 100 vote that you have to follow. It's you consent yourself. Contracts, governments are instituted among men by consent of the governed. Now, on another rabbit trail, while we've been sitting here, I've been watching these trees drop on us little helicopters, little pieces of the tree that are formulated in such a way as they'll spin on the way down. And so we've been showered, well, almost could see it. We've been showered by these helicopters.
Trees are spreading their seeds.
They are. So we're planting seeds.
So a question, if these are unalienable rights, we cannot offer them, but if they are usurped by a government without our consent, would that then institute an effort by Yah to bring us back if we are his?
I guess I don't see governments bringing us back to Yah.
No.
The same
I
way
see
that
them
Pharaoh
as
started
distracting us
pressing
away.
the Israelites to make them cry out to come come back to Yah. I think that's what
Okay.
Yes,
saying.
yes. And I think in my looking through the word, the point at which we begin to cry, where we are under such duress and stress that we cannot control, we did not, by our choices, put ourselves in a position where we must do that which we would not do. When we then are in that position and then we cry to Yah, that is where he comes and rescues his people. There are phrases that suggest that until we cry, he doesn't hear us. But that cry must also be part of our obedience to him and frustration that we cannot obey him.
Well, he did say, if we don't listen to his voice, we talked about this the other day, if we don't listen to his voice, then he can't listen to us when we cry.
Exactly.
You know, the terrible problem with the Old Testament, which I can understand why people want to say it doesn't exist and let's throw it away and have a new religion, is because in the Old Testament it says, Yahweh says do some things. He says Shema Israel, Yahuwah Eloheinu, Yahuwah Echad, and part of the Shema is to shomer, watch, keep, guard, observe, Yom HaShabbat, sit down, do no work. Now, if you sign up for that, he says, if you Shema my voice, I will Shema your voice.
Yes.
And I'll be your champion, your defender. I'll be the mighty tiger that just rips everybody else apart if they come near you. But if you don't Shema my voice, I can't and won't Shema your voice. And even though you scream and cry out, I can't hear.
So the point is there, if we don't listen and we are put under duress, there's no remedy.
There's no remedy. But what that means is, let's just project a hypothetical situation that say a whole bunch of people, say 10 or 10 billion people, were told lies about listening to Yahuwah's voice. So they haven't listened to his voice. So they can't listen to his voice because they haven't guarded his voice, because they were told his voice was nailed to the tree and done away with. Then when they pray, he can't hear the prayers.
Right.
He hears the prayers of his people who hear his voice.
Yeah.
We've done this talking and made these videos projecting his voice through his language that other people say doesn't exist. But according to him, if you don't hear his words, your voice doesn't exist, and you can pray all you want and believe all you want and have all the faith you can muster, and he can't hear unless you invent a new God who does hear, in which case that's a different story. But we're talking about Yodevave Kanash Shemayim Ve'eretz, the maker of heaven and earth, who established rules and contract and said, guess what? He's not going to impose this on you, but just like the Declaration of the United States, the rights and privileges, obligations, and responses from Elohim are according to the consent of the governed. And what does it mean to do the Torah? I've heard this phrase, oh, you're doing the Torah, doing the Torah. What does that mean? Doing the Torah. It means consent to be governed by hearing, guarding, proclaiming, and walking in his ways. It's as simple as that. And when you do, you synchronize with his frequency, vibe, good vibrations the Beach Boys talked about. That's what this is about. And when you do, he has arranged the structure of the geology of the earth and the psychology of kings, that the walls of Jericho fall and the loins of Belshazzar come unglued and dismantled when he sees the handwriting on the wall, which was written probably in Paleo-Hebrew. Mene mene tekelu Farsi. That's what this is about. So you can choose to be governed. You can choose then, the Declaration of Independence of the Kingdom of Heaven is to quit being independent and do what he said. And that's about all there is to say about that.
Choose ye this day whom you will follow.
And follow means not just believe, but because you believe, Shema Shomer, walk in his ways, observe to do, Asha, which is Ayin Shin Hey, do them. And so we've tried to talk about ways to implement and to do, have the words on your door, have the words on the dashboard of your car, have the words like in these little things. Some people have put them on clothes, headbands, whatever. Have fun with this stuff. Anybody else want to say something?
Yeah,
Yep.
and by walking this path, by observing the Moedim, we are involved in our wedding rehearsal. We are walking out the steps, preparing for the bridegroom to come. We're doing the wedding rehearsal.
And we're building the culture of Israel, the confederated 12 tribes. It's not just about the Jews. It's the 12 tribes reconfederated, which is what that flag is you had flying on that mast not long ago, but it got, better to wear out than rust away. That's like, it got worn out because you flew.
Amen.
And what if feng shui, right? It's the art of placing your furniture the right way and to have the right vibrations.
Exactly.
So what if to keep the feast, the muedim is really this posture, this physical posture.
It's Ya Feng Shui.
Yeah. Exactly.
Whatever that is.
It's something you eat with rice and ginger. Don't worry about that.
Okay. So are we done here with this?
I believe so. Shalom.
Shalom.
Yellow.